Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I just want to thank you so very, very much for being with me as we continue our study of the feast days of Israel. We have been looking at the Sabbath. We looked at the Feast of Trumpets. We're looking now at Yom Kippur, otherwise known as the Day of Atonement. As I've shared with you in the Jewish mentality and the ancient Jewish writings and what have you, Yom Kippur was considered the most holy and the most important of all of the feast days. Now, that's very highly significant for us. And of course, one of the great questions is, and one of the questions that we've been examining is, when was the atonement completed? I have to admit, I really never questioned, for the longest of times, I really never questioned that the atonement would only be consummated at the coming of the Lord. As I read Hebrews chapter 9, in the description of the typological Old Covenant Day of Atonement, it's more than obvious that the Day of Atonement simply was not consummated until the high priest came out of the most holy place and declared salvation to the audience. That's when he blessed the audience. Well, as I began to share that with other people, it shocked me, literally shocked me, to be called a heretic for that. Because people were saying, no, in Romans chapter 5, written in the 50s, 56, 57 AD, Paul said, speaking of Christ, by whom we have, which is a present tense. Was that an aorist? I've forgotten. Anyway, we have received the atonement. And people just rather vehemently pointing out, Preston, they had already received the atonement in 56, 57 AD. What in the world are you talking about that the atonement would not be completed until the parousia of Christ? They would take me to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, God who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past by the fathers has in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, by whom he created all things. He is the heir of all things. When he, that is Christ, had purged our sin, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Well, wow. I mean, that just seems clear cut, but it's not clear cut. Someone just recently challenging me on this on this issue of when the atonement was completed. They said they cited this, Hebrews chapter 1, and they said, when he had purged our sins, he sat down at the right hand. I asked in response, well, okay, then what you've got to do is answer the following question. When did Jesus sit down at the right hand of the Majesty on high? Now, remember, this individual and a boatload of other people have been arguing that the atonement was finished at the cross. I mean, after all, John chapter 19, Jesus, hanging on the cross, said, it is finished. There you go, right? Now, all of this seems to have a first blush plausibility to it, but a first blush is not always the definitive and the proper answer. So again, the question is, when he had by himself purged our sins, he sat down. When did Jesus sit down? Well, when he purged our sin. But let me ask you this question, as I ask this particular individual, and as I have asked individual after individual. In order to complete the atonement, did Jesus not have to enter the most holy place? Now, don't forget, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 24 tells us that Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands, but into heaven itself. The typology of the text is high priest went into the most holy place once a year, not without blood, which he sprinkled upon the altar. But the point of it is, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest went into the most holy place to do what? To sprinkle the blood. Without the sprinkling of the blood on the mercy seat, there was no mercy. You know, mercy seat, mercy. And you can say, well, Don, in the first century, the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, the Hilasterion, as it was known, was not in there. That's not the point. The point of it is the most holy place was the location of the mercy seat. And even though there was no mercy seat, even though there was no Ark of the Covenant in the most holy place of the Herodian temple, every year when the high priest went in, he sprinkled blood where the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be. He sprinkled to the north, the south, the east, and the west to indicate, if the ark was there, that's what was taking place. The point being, ladies and gentlemen, there was no atonement without the sprinkling of the blood. No atonement whatsoever. So it goes back to my question. When did Jesus apply his blood in the most holy place? It was at his ascension. But wait a minute. His ascension was, for all practical purposes' sake, 2 months after his passion. So if Jesus had to go into the most holy place, there to offer his life in the most holy place, and he did not enter the most holy place for, quote, 2 months, unquote, and yes, I'm rounding it off, then the atonement was not consummated at the cross. And this shows that the atonement was indeed a process. Just recently on Facebook, an individual, I asked him, do you deny that the atonement was a 3-step process? And he said, there is no process to the atonement at all. I must confess, that was the first time I'd ever heard anyone deny that. So I said, in response, okay, do you deny that the death of Jesus was necessary for the atonement? Well, of course, he does not deny that. That's step 1. Do you deny that Jesus had to enter into the most holy place as part of the atonement process? That's step 2, right? Step 1, step 2. Do you deny that Jesus had to come out of the most holy place as part of the final act of the atonement? Well, of course he did. But as I told him, you can deny it all you want. But denial is not refutation, and denial is not proof. And in Hebrews chapter 9, all 3 steps of the Day of Atonement are delineated very carefully, very emphatically, and very explicitly. Now, once at the end of the ages, Christ has appeared to sacrifice himself to put away sin. He has entered into the most holy place, not made with hands. And to those who eagerly look for him, he shall appear again the second time, apart from sin, for salvation. Folks, that's a 3-step process. So once again, a person can deny that the atonement is a process, but denial is not proof and it's not refutation. Interestingly enough, And I know I'll probably get some people responding to this, but that's okay. Interestingly enough, I have gone to the internet, and they've got this website called Ask a Rabbi. Now, he's a modern rabbi, but he's familiar with the ancient writings and the ancient practices. You can do this too. I would urge you to do this. Pardon me. And I asked the question, could the atonement, and was the atonement under Torah, was that Torah, was that atonement finished at the moment of the sacrificing of the sacrifice? Or was it completed when the high priest took the blood into the most holy place? Or was it completed when the high priest came back out? His response was actually rather curt. I don't know how he would respond to the questions now, but he said it is literally ridiculous to suggest that the atonement was completed without the return of the high priest out of the most holy place. I asked my friend, I have a friend in Israel who has two sons who are leading rabbis in Israel. They are the head of two different synagogues. He is a world-class, world-renowned Hebrew scholar. Funny guy. I really, really enjoy conversing, and communicating with him. We obviously come from totally different viewpoints. But I asked him the same question. Could the atonement ever be considered to be finished, overdone with the sacrifice of the animal? Or was it when the high priest entered the most holy place? Or was it when the high priest came out of the most holy place? He was rather adamant as well. He said there's simply no way to say the atonement was completed until the high priest came out. Now again, I know somebody's going to jump up and say, well, they're nothing but unbelieving Jews. Well, let me ask you a question here, ladies and gentlemen. What was it that the Jews didn't believe? They didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. Did they believe in the inspiration of Torah? Absolutely. Did they believe that Yahweh gave all of the instructions of the Day of Atonement? Absolutely. Did they historically know and understand when the Day of Atonement was over? If not, why not? And I want someone who wants to just simply wave their hand at the testimony of learned rabbis who are simply sharing the history of understanding of Yom Kippur. I want somebody to show either from rabbinic sources or show from the biblical text that all three steps of the process of the atonement were not necessary for salvation. Folks, it's not enough to simply scoff and say, well, they're nothing but a bunch of unbelieving Jews. They didn't believe in Jesus. That's not the point. The point is they understood their history. They understood the cultic practices. And they say it was ridiculous to claim that the atonement was completed at the moment of killing of the sacrifice. It was, in fact, a process. Now, I'm really out of time for today, but I shared with you from Leviticus chapter 9, 22 and 23. Now, this is not about the Day of Atonement, but it shows the idea and the significance of the high priest going, offering the sacrifice on the altar, going into the temple, going into either the holy place or the most holy place, and then coming out. Okay? I shared that with you. Well, one individual on Facebook literally just scoffed at it. That has nothing to do with the Day of Atonement. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Hey, look, in the meantime, take advantage of my 2-book special for the month of June 2024, Temple to Telos, and The End of the Law. Both of these books deal with the passing of the law of Moses, which impinges on and connects with the idea, of course, when did the law of Moses pass away? It would only pass when the entirety of the old law was fulfilled, Matthew 5:17 and 18. And this book goes into tremendous detail about defining the law. Can you break the law down into, oh, that's moral law, that's still binding, and then you have ceremonial law, and the ceremonial laws were nailed to the cross? That's not biblical. But anyway, if you purchase both of these books separately and paid shipping, you spend almost $20 more. Almost $20 more than I've got them on special for the month of June 2024, U.S. orders only. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. I inadvertently said the other day that I left this book out of the special, but this is part of the special, okay? So go there, order the 2 books. You're going to find some fantastic information there, and you're going to love it. May challenge you, but you're going to love it nonetheless. Okay, out of time. I'll see you on the flip side.